I welcome the release of 100 Israeli hostages and the hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, many of whom are women and teenagers detained without trial. I also support the government position in calling for an end to the Israeli practice of administrative detention. This is only adding further to the resentment of moderate Palestinians and is also further adding to a justification narrative of Israeli apartheid. Like every other Irish person, my colleagues and I in the regional group were delighted to see the release of Emily Hand, who represents the continuing plight of the other hostages who have yet to be released. The hopes that the 7-day truce could be extended with further possible movements to an extensive ceasefire now appear dashed. My colleagues and I continue to support the position of government to work with our European partners in trying to pressure for a sustainable humanitarian ceasefire. In addition, diplomatic efforts must be made to build pressure for intermediary-supported peace talks that put the two-state solution firmly back on the international agenda. Minister, the death toll that was visited by Hamas jihadis on the Israeli kibbutz and the concert areas was merciless. It was inhumane, it was horrific, and it can never be forgotten. But the resulting collective punishment on the Palestinian people in an effort to deconstruct Hamas and its war machine is also inhumane. It is also horrific, and the end mission does certainly not justify the means. The sands of the Middle East have for too long soaked up the blood of innocents because of political and religious ideologies that choose to see people not of one tribe as having no right to exist in another. Ireland must do everything in its power to continue to influence and mobilise the international community, including the leaders of the Middle Eastern neighbours, to persevere in pressure for an immediate path to peace. I welcome the additional EU humanitarian aid approved to the Palestinian people and Ireland's growing contribution to it. The suffering of little children must and should spur each one of us and every civilised nation to do more so that we can bring an end to the ongoing military campaign of the Israeli Defence Forces and pressure for a political agreement to open new discussions on a long-term two-state solution to bring enduring peace. We have a second war also going on in Europe, the Ukraine war. And this war also has the ability to destabilise Europe in the future. Early optimism that this war would be short-lived is now completely evaporated, and both sides, it appears, are entrenched and dug in. Ireland, to be fair, has stepped up to the mark completely, with over 100,000 Ukrainians now taking refuge here. The discussion at European level of continuing to provide assistance to Ukraine recognises the rights of a country to exist and remain sovereign within its borders. The aggressive actions of Russia on the pretext of national security or the risk of plantation exercises in western Ukraine can never be condoned, and they must be resisted. For those who believe Europe should reduce support to Ukraine in the hope that it would appease the Russian president, I suggest they would be well-minded to review the history of Europe from 1938 to 1941. The Ukrainian people have a right to their democracy, which is the target of the Russian invasion. We in Ireland, who hold our own republic and democracy dear, know that you have to confront the invaders or else be ground into the dust. It is important that the European Union take steps to solidify its cybersecurity and its communications and energy infrastructure, and that it supports Ukraine to do likewise. Russia is engaged in and active in promoting asymmetric warfare in Ukraine. Europe must continue to push back against the Russian aggression and continue to impose further sanctions as necessary in order to see Russia and its leadership come to their senses regarding their policy to enslave a neighbouring population, which has utterly rejected their paternalistic overtures repeatedly. In terms of the EU strategic agenda, there appears to be discussion building regarding a process of enlargement, and such discussions cannot completely ignore the direction of climate change, the migration of peoples, and the ability of the continent to continue to feed itself, but at the same time protect its environment. And I would raise concerns I have, Minister, regarding our own agricultural community into the future and Ireland's ability to feed itself. And specifically, I'm talking about the Europeans' action on the counting and the computation of carbon emissions and greenhouse gas. And I would say to you that the science on carbon emissions and sequestration is still only in its infancy. And the methodologies that are being used for carbon counting is establishing 2 tiers, international book tiers. Some apply to countries in Europe and some apply to Ireland. And we are in the 2nd tier, which basically sees bovines as being a significant emitter of greenhouse gas. But they do not take account of our mineral soils and the ability of soils to sequester greenhouse gas. So we are in the middle of a climate emergency, Minister, but we need to take on board new cutting-edge scientific explanations. And I would ask that government would seriously look at this. There is evidence, including even from Teagasc now, that mineral farms and farm practices have specific and very individual reactions in terms of greenhouse gas sequestration. So I would ask, Minister, that government looks and see how we can look at, and the Taoiseach spoke about it this morning, the opportunities to sequester greenhouse gas that are growing, but also our ability to diversify and accelerate our renewable energy sector. Wind and solar present the greatest opportunities to Ireland to become a European leader in the new clean energy production. And I think along with leaders, we need to support vulnerable populations. And the best way to do that is to bring our energy aspirations forcefully to the European agenda.